Yes, good afternoon and welcome to the December committee meeting for strategic planning. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence and appointment of substitute members, please.
Apologies have been received from Councillor Alan Chandler and Catherine Russell, and 3 apologies have been received with substitutes from Councillor Kevin Parker, Andre Gonzalez de Savage, Councillor Keith Holland Delamere, with Councillor Stephen Clark, Councillor Cecile Irving Swift and Councillor Sue Sharps substituting respectively.
Thank you for that. Do any members have a declaration of interest of any matters are declared on this agenda? Take that for a no. The minutes of the committee meeting held on the 19th of November are still to follow, I believe.
They'll be presented at the next committee meeting.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, under the Openness of Local Government Bodies Regulation 2014, members of the public or those party to the meeting are permitted to film, broadcast or report on the meeting subject to the efficient running of the meeting not being affected. Only those people who are registered in line with the committee's speaking procedure can address the committee. Those speaking are not permitted to ask questions of either members or officers. All speakers will have 5 minutes in which to make their statement. There are no planned fire drills today, so if the alarm does sound, evacuation instructions will be given by Democratic officers, and the assembly point is at the bottom of the steps on the mount, which is the, we can't see it through the closed window, but the green bit over there. Could electronic devices please be switched off or onto silent mode? For those members using laptops, could I please ask they press F1 on their machines and a blue light will come on indicating the sound is muted. This meeting will be webcast on the Council's corporate YouTube channel. Therefore, when speaking, please use your microphones close to your face. For the benefit of those who are watching on the webcast, and welcome you all are, I'll introduce the top table. On my far right is Diana Davis from Democratic Service. On my immediate right, Catherine Hall from Legal. Myself, Phil Bignell, Chair. On my left, Nikki Scaife, Head of Planning, and Dan Callis, Planning Officer, who will present the 2 items on the agenda for us today. Okay. Chair's announcements. I'll remind you now, because you're bound to forget with Christmas coming, that the meeting, which was scheduled for the 18th of February, has been put back to the 11th of February because the DHL inquiry starts in this building on the 18th. So the meeting at the moment will be on the 11th of February. Obviously, we haven't got an agenda yet. It may or may not happen. And it will be at an earlier time of 1 p.m. And that also means if any site visits are necessary for that meeting, then they will be on the 4th of February. Right, so without further ado, I'll ask Dan Callis to present item 5, which is the parcels H30A, 34A and 34B at Toaster Vale. Thank you, Dan.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Item 5 is an application for reserve matters for 160 dwellings as part of the ongoing Toaster South urban extension development. The application is for all reserve matters within the area lined in red. And just to give a bit of context as to where this sits within the wider urban extension, it's the area highlighted in red that you can see there. So the area to the sort of the east and the southeast, these parcels already have reserve matters consent and are under construction. The areas to the north, there's this area of housing and also the school are just shown purely indicatively, although no reserve matters have been received for those as yet. In terms of the site, just to clarify as well, you can see the position of the relief road to the southwest of the application site here, heading up towards the A43, just off the top of the plan. So just quickly some photographs of the site. This is looking from the southern corner of the site. You can just see the relief road on the left-hand side of the image here. This section of the relief road is not yet open. You can see how the this part of the site is really quite flat. The hedgerow on the right-hand side runs through the middle of the site, and the site extends just beyond this tree here. This is standing in the same position, looking in more of a northerly direction. You can see the boundary with the adjacent parcel that's under construction on the right-hand side, the hedgerow through the middle of the site, and the site continues beyond that as far as the internal main spine road. So just returning to the tree that we saw in the first photograph, that's at the north end of the site. This photograph is taken standing next to that tree, looking in the opposite direction. So the construction compound that we saw is there. The relief road is on the right-hand side, again, just showing how the site is flat and open. And then standing on the other side of the tree, looking more easterly, this is the other part of the site. This is a view looking towards Wood Burkett, which is the small hamlet, and that's located just down in the dip. In the middle ground, you can see some of the houses under construction on the right-hand side, and you can just about make out where these boxes are. Coming up across through here is the main internal spine road, which is the site's northern boundary. Again, from that internal spine road, looking back towards the tree we were just under, so northern boundary running through here, and the site continuing off to the left. And then finally, just a view again, the partially constructed internal spine road, the hedgerow through the centre of the site, and the application site continues all the way back to the houses that you can see being constructed in the distance. So that last photograph was taken approximately in this location up here. We have the existing internal spine road, which already has separate reserve matters consent in its own right. The hedgerow that runs through the middle of the site here is all retained. The relief road you can see here, and then there's a strip of linear public open space running parallel to that, which already has separate reserve matters consent as part of the detailed consent for the spine road. The proposal comprises a mixture of 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroomed houses. There is public open space, as I said, yes, to the south, already consented. And again, we've indicatively got the development shown to the north that would be coming forward in due course. Just to point out, this area in here, this triangular area, is an area of open space that will contain a play area, equipped play area. In terms of affordable housing, they would be the plots that are highlighted. So the orange plots would be shared ownership and the yellow plots would be rented. This comprises a single cluster of 16 units, which is within the cluster size that's deemed acceptable on the development, anywhere sort of roughly between 5 and 20 is generally considered acceptable. The affordable units comprise a mixture of 1, 2 and 3 beds, includes a bungalow as well. As I said, it's 10% provision, which is compliant with the requirements of the Section 106. In terms of the proposed house types, we have the street scenes here, which provide an indication as to the mix of types proposed. I can confirm that all of the house types conform with the design code and closely reflect types already approved for the other developers on this SUE, including Persimmon, Bloor and David Wilson Homes. They comprise a mixture of single-storey, 2-storey, 2.5-storey and 3-storey, and a variety of elevational treatments, which provides variety and visual interest. So just to clarify, the top line is the view of houses that would front onto the hedgerow that would be retained through the centre of the site. You can see these are a mixture of some Georgian, Victorian and vernacular elevational treatments and mixtures of semi-detached and detached houses. And then the row below, a similar sort of mix, but there is quite significant variety in the house types proposed. And that would be the facade, as it were, which faced onto the relief road. And then lastly, we have the frontage onto the main internal spine road, which again, as you can see, it's got a mixture of 3, 2.5, 2-storey houses, mixture of house types, materials. The use of materials is consistent with again, the design code and the palette of materials that's been used on the development to date. So it brings that consistency and harmony with the development around it. And just to confirm on that last point, and to clarify that there are 2 stone plots on here. So they're the blue edged plots down this bottom corner, fronting onto the main internal spine roads. And this is a small triangular area of open space here, so quite prominent. The rest of the plots are a mixture of brick, painted brick and render, and the roofing materials are a mixture of artificial slate and plain tile. With regard to updates, members' attention is drawn to the written updates, particularly the changes to the recommended conditions following the submission of appropriate details relating to both means of enclosure and meter boxes. There is also a correction to the published report and the confirmation of no objection from the lead local flood authority. The recommendation is that consent be granted subject to the conditions outlined in the reports with those changes in the updates, with delegated authority to officers to amend those conditions as deemed necessary. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Dan. Do any members have any questions of the officer at this stage, please? You obviously bamboozled them down here. Oh, sorry, we have no speakers on this item. So we're now into debate very rapidly. Who wants to start discussing this? Charles, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question actually for Dan relating to the previous point. What's the housing density and how does it compare to the rest of the SUE there, Dan? Because it just looks to be a lot of housing and very little green space.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't have the actual density figure to hand, but the density is not dissimilar to what we've had elsewhere. I think there is, on this particular parcel, there is a greater mix of smaller house types than you may have on other parcels. Some areas will be, have a greater number of 3-4 bed detached houses, etc. This parcel is more towards the lower end of the scale, so therefore, we do end up with a lot more units in the same space. But in terms of the open space, there's significant open space around the parcel, and the hedgerow through the centre is retained. So it's making an effective use of an area which was designated for development from the master plan.
Just remind me where the green space is. Obviously, between the housing and the relief road.
Yes, so there's the linear open space running up the relief road here. There's obviously the linear open space around the retained hedges, small triangular green. There's this triangular area here, which I said in the presentation would include a play area. There's also this larger park here, which would have a larger, more destination play area. And then there's open space in and around these areas, linear open space through the development has quite extensive areas of open space running throughout it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor
Irvine-Smith, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just one thing, when you show the affordable houses, I don't call them being paper. Cool. They are all in one corner. Do you think it's wise? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As I said in the presentation, normally pepper potting comprises of clustering the affordable into groups of anywhere between sort of 5 to 20. So 20 is the maximum size. And I think we also have to remember that pepper potting applies to pepper potting across the entire development, not pepper potting necessarily within each smaller parcel. So if you pepper pot too small, I think there can be issues with the housing associations. It can discourage them from taking it on. They like to have clusters of a certain size from a ongoing management point of view. But having a cluster of 16 is perfectly within scope, as it were, but within normal parameters, given that we're looking at this realistically on a development-wide pepper potting, not that it has to be within each parcel. Thank you.
Yes, continue, please.
Because so if you have agree of all the other, the one you have are just at the boundary at the north. Where are the other? Because you have another development. So are they facing back to, because you say, yes, it's fine, but it would be interesting for me to understand where is the other.
Okay, so just as an example, we have the proposed affordable housing up here at the north end of the site, which actually is directly opposite the school. So obviously it's, you know, convenient from that perspective. The development we had previously, which is this area in grey below, the affordable houses are, from memory, this block in here. I can't recall if there was a second block, but there's clear separation between those. And I think in terms of pepper potting, it's in that context of the, you know, the wider context as to how they're separated. But it's not that you would have sort of isolated individual affordable units. It's more that they're spread rather, you know, you don't have 200 in one block. You have them spread out. Thank you.
Councillor Pritchard, please.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to Anglian Water, could you confirm that their approval has been now given to the surface water strategy?
Surface water drainage is covered separately by a condition on the outline consent, and that's the sort of mechanism through which Anglian Water and the lead local flood and/or the lead local flood authority would agree to that, and it doesn't have to necessarily be approved at this point. I would say that we do have a concurrent application in to discharge the relevant condition, and from memory, I think we're because it would principally be the lead local flood authority that we would look to on a surface water drainage condition discharge. I think we've had comments from those, and that is from memory with the applicant to respond to, but it's not a matter that's pertinent to the determination of the reserve matters application before us.
Secondly, with regards to the objection for parking and visitors parking, has that been resolved?
So the parking requirement on the development, we do have the adopted what was South Northants parking standards and design SPD that sat parallel to the county-wide parking SPD. But within this development, the parking standard has consistently been applied in relation to what was approved on the design code, and all of the phases to date have complied with that. I would also point out that there's no objection from the Highway Authority in relation to parking at all. So the parking provision, I mean, there are at least 2 spaces for each unit, off-road parking spaces allocated. The parking provision is deemed to be in accordance with what's required.
Yeah. And also with regards, you mentioned obviously, and this was probably before my time, is that there was a 10% of affordable housing on the 106. Has anything in that contract been with regards to variation or validation with regards to later in the development, the SUE, so that we can actually look at it, or in fact the council could look at it and say, okay, you know, the developer is making, should we say, more margin than he was 7 or 8 years ago. Has that process been put in place where we can review that situation?
I don't believe off the top of my head that there's any viability reappraisal clauses within this section 106. Yeah, I think it is just a set 10%, and there's no opportunity to review that.
I find that quite astounding. You know, when you think over that period of time, where in fact, when you look at the SNC scenario with South Northants situation with regards to affordable housing, I think it was 40 or 50%. We're down to 10% made 7 or 8 years ago, and I appreciate you can't do anything about it. But having said that, I think it's quite unacceptable that we get to the stage where later in the SUE, we're in a situation where, you know, there could be a significant amount of margins made by the developer, other than, in fact, some more affordable homes.
Yeah, thank you. As you rightly point out, it's something, you know, it's a position that we're sort of stuck with, as it were, in terms of the Section 106 agreement is what it is, and it doesn't have those provisions for reviewing it. I would point out that there was the application for an additional 211 dwellings that we had a couple of years ago within the SUE, and that did deliver fully policy compliant provision of affordable housing. So that sort of bolstered the amount of affordable that has been provided within the SUE overall. Thank you.
I would point out, Councillor Pritchard, that the original affordable housing was actually negotiated under SNC anyway, long time ago, so probably 6 or 7 years ago. But I'm kind of with you, because I thought there was a thing where you had a chance every 5 years to reappraise it, but I'll turn to my legal expert, am I right, and test that, please.
Thank you, Chair. There is an encouragement in the NPPF and government guidance that Section 106 agreements are kept under review. It's an encouragement, not a requirement. Normally, so before an agreement is 5 years old, if something comes forward that is changed sufficiently to warrant a discussion and a review of agreed provisions, whether it's affordable housing or other obligations secured, then the applicants can come forward to the council, and the council can decide whether or not to support any proposed changes to the 106 under a deed of variation. Alternatively, we can keep the position under review, and if we feel that, if either party then feels that as the matter evolves, because obviously these matters can take some time, there is anything that changes that might warrant a change therefore in the legal agreement, then those discussions can be had. But it's not a requirement, and often 106s will set out whether or not and when something might be reviewed. For example, submission of viability and provisions or uplift on land and things like that. So they would be already in the 106, and so I assume from this that they aren't on this occasion. But there is some scope if parties wish to review things as a matter evolves, but I gather that that hasn't been proposed on this occasion.
Well, two questions. Would you consider that it was a poorly drafted 106?
I haven't had sight of it, so I wouldn't know. But I would also say that they tend to be quite dated quite quickly. And
Well, not to have a provision to review it sounds to me like it was very poorly drafted.
But that's a matter between the parties, including the council that was negotiating at that time, and it depends very much on the circumstances which surrounded the application at that point.
Okay. So the second question is, should we ask for a review?
Hang on, can we bring in Nikki on this one, Charles?
Through you, Chair. Normally, if we were looking at viability review mechanisms, they would be imposed in the original 106. It's not something you can add in at a later stage. The 106 for this one is dated 2015, and it's just looking through it, there wasn't, for whatever reason, there wasn't a viability review mechanism clause imposed in this 106. So we can't now go back and ask for that to be put in.
That wasn't quite what Catherine said.
What I'm saying is that there is an encouragement within the legislation and guidance that we that all parties keep legal agreements reviewed and under review at periodic times. That doesn't mean that you will necessarily see anything being changed. It just means that we're saying, has an obligation been complied with and discharged? Is it being complied with? Because some of them are ongoing obligations, for example. And as I say, if then it is brought to our attention that there might be some other issues regarding other obligations that are secured, do they then need some additional work, and is therefore a deed of variation needed? But it would be a whole group discussion with applicants and the council. We wouldn't necessarily initiate that ourselves. It would normally come from the applicants. On this occasion, as the officers said, there isn't a viability provision in there to go back and look at that, to sort of to use as a means in which to review that position.
Could I actually suggest that our planning department on the next phases that come along on this SUE is that consideration should be given to the 106 agreement, and
Can't-
you can't
No,
do that.
you can't. No, this is the SUE is in 2,740
Yeah,
houses.
exactly.
We're unquoted.
exactly.
That's it. So we are in no position to be able to request renegotiation on that. Section 106 was written in 2015.
I thought that our legal advisor was saying
Well,
that
that's
provided
good.
the two parties get together.
Yeah,
and
but
then
she's
vision-
suggesting that when you originally write the section 106, you should encourage to include a clause, which clearly Nikki says there isn't, that would enable that at some point if either parties wanted to trigger it. But because it's not written in there, neither parties can actually trigger that request for renegotiation. So we are kind of at an impasse here for the duration of these houses.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor
Can,
Mansell.
can you confirm that all the current 106 agreements that we've passed as a WNC have got that provision for a viability provision included?
Nikki?
It does, that does tend to be the general practice. It depends on the size of the development as well and the build out period. So there's.
I mean, I'd
factors
quite
that
like
come into
I'd
it.
quite like a separate piece of work to be done to confirm to us that those viability provisions are included. Please.
Okay, well, I'll pass that on to, yeah.
Councillor Irvine Swift.
Thank you. Well, I was going, that is part of the governance. So I think maybe if you wouldn't mind, Chair, to write to the Chair of Standard to see if we could look at Section 106. Because if you are aware, at audit, we look at the collection of Section 106, but we didn't look at the governance of Section 106. Oh, but it was quite clear that a big piece of work. So if you wouldn't mind to write to the chair to say, could we look into the governance arrangement for Section 106? Because now we are just one person, WNC, so it should be easier. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Sharps, please.
Can we put it back up, please? Would you mind? And could you zoom in? So there are several roads that lead off of the larger mainframe roads. Are they the same width or smaller? Can you confirm this for me? So I don't know if they're going to be called courts or closest. That'll be something that will be confirmed at a later time. But are they the same width?
So my understanding is that the main spine road is normally slightly wider. That's the one actually outside the site, would normally be slightly wider in case it's used as a bus route. But then the side roads coming down, so they're the ones, the three coming down through here, would all be the same size. The exact dimensions I don't have to hand, I'm afraid. But the turning head you see in here is more of a mews type street, so that would still be a public road, public turning head, and then the areas coming off that would be more like a shared parking court. So the highway would just be the extent of the turning head you can see there. In instances like this one, this is more of a shared private drive, so that's a private road. Again, you've got those here, 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 and here. Shared private drives coming off parallel with the hedgerow through there. And again, shared private drives or shared parking courts. So in the main, we've got three streets running down, and then I think we just have this one mews street coming off it. The rest of them are shared private drives.
Okay, so from I've dealt with a different estate who has had a similar layout where they've had a main drag with the bus that goes along it, and they suffer from very severe parking issues, and this, I fear, will suffer from the same issues, and despite the planning that you've put into this, which I can see a great deal of planning has been put into it, because you've taken the time to create those parking courts, they are wonderful. Unfortunately, the roads that they lead out then onto the main roads where the buses will come along, I fear that they will become also a parking area. I don't believe they're wide enough. And what I'm trying to say now is we need to make sure at this point or at the next possible point that we make sure that they are wide enough for a car to move both ways on condition.
So is that with the main spine road that I'm indicating with the cursor there?
Any mews or road that leads towards houses needs to have the width for 2 cars.
So the widths that are indicated here are what are prescribed by the Highway Authority, and they would
Can't see your
stipulate.
cursor. I'm afraid it's
Sorry.
invisible to us.
Can you see?
Oh, I can see it now.
Yeah. So the widths of these roads, so the mews down here and then the other roads, they all accord with what the local highway authority would expect in terms of adoptable standards, and therefore the dimensions of those are what the highway authority.
So we're going to,
Request.
well, I'm just going to say adoptable standards.
Hmm.
Can we not do better than adoptable standards?
It's difficult because I think a highway authority will look to whether something complies with adoptable standards or not, and if it's greater than, there is the potential they would see that as an additional maintenance burden if it goes over and above. As to whether those adoptable standards need review, that would be a separate matter. But from a developer's point of view, I think they would look to comply with the standard to ensure that there was certainty of adoption when that point came.
Okay, we can't tie it in through any one of the various, RC2 is development community facilities, public services, transport position. It doesn't quite fit there, but I'm sure we've got one that we could possibly tie it into.
So with policy,
Yeah.
is that? I mean, the only thing I would say is that with this being a reserve matters application, it's largely dictated by the design code, and that contains stated dimensions that are expected, and said those stated dimensions that were agreed in the design code comply with the Highway Authority's adoption standards. So the Highway Authority had input into those. And the point of the design code is to give the developer certainty as to, if you do it this way, it will be acceptable. So I think, with having complied with that and with the Highway Authority not objecting, whilst I completely understand your point about the issues with on-road parking congestion and how that can impact on the flow of traffic, if the proposal is complying with everything that it's required to comply with, I think any discussion around whether those adoption standards are suitable or not in today's world is more of a matter for the Highway Authority to review.
I accept that you're saying it's about the flow of traffic, but actually it's more than that. It's about the quality of life.
Well, it is, sorry, I was being short, but yes, there are many factors. There's flow of traffic, there's safety, there's encouraging people to walk and cycle and all this sort of stuff.
If we can find some way of including that at a later point, I will be very happy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pritchard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Could I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation to accept this application, or the conditions, if I can put it that way?
Seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor James. If nobody else wants to speak, I will go to a vote, but you've still got an opportunity to speak. Councillor Erwin Swift, please. Oh, I thought you were waving at me, sorry. Is that a vote, Councillor Purser, or do you? Councillor Purser, please speak.
I was just wanting to check that the houses facing onto the relief road, so they're the ones facing south west, probably. Just checking that environmental health are happy that there's not going to be a noise problem for those houses.
Okay, Chair. So again, there is a condition on the outline planning permission that specifically deals with that point. That again, subsequent to getting reserve matters, there would be a need to discharge the condition where the applicant would submit details of what the expected noise levels were going to be and what mitigation would be proposed on those, whether it's triple glazing or use of certain vents, etc., etc. The relationship of those properties, as we saw in the stop sharing my screen, but as we saw in that layout, the position of those dwellings relative to the relief road is consistent with the adjacent parcel, which we've already consented in terms of distance and orientation, and it's also consistent with what we've approved on previous situations. So hopefully, in summary, I think that matter's adequately addressed. All right, thank you.
Did Councillor Humphries, did you? No. On the relief road, Dan, is there a avenue of trees or anything? Is there any sort of vegetation alongside of the relief road?
So there is. I don't have those plans to hand, I'm afraid, but yeah, generally, what we've sought to do with the landscape along the relief road is to provide a strip of trees and shrubs that will, in time, once established, will provide a visual screen between the housing and the relief road. And then there is sort of a linear path running along, but more sort of adjacent to the housing side of that strip. But it's a mixture of trying to provide some visual screening as well as ecological benefits, but also some sort of interconnection and openness as well. So
I know I'm going a bit off beam here, but that footpath which is nearer the houses, is that a cycleway as well as a footpath, or was that a separate entity, or do you not know?
Off the top of my head,
sorry, I'm not pushing. I'm sorry.
I think it's not officially is designated as a cycleway, although you could probably just cycle along it informally. But I don't. It's not a 3 metre wide path from memory. Thank you.
All right, committee. So we've finished the debate. Are we happy to take a vote at this stage? All those in favour of accepting the officer's recommendation, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you for that. So we'll move swiftly on to item 6, which is again in the same area. This is permission for 240 houses on Toaster Vale, London Road. Thank you, Dan.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So yes, moving on and moving a very short distance, we have item 6, which is another application for reserve matters on the ongoing Toaster South Urban Extension development. This reserve matters application is for 246 dwellings. The application is for, again, all matters within the red line. 2 public rights of way across the site. These would be formally diverted separately via a Section 257 application following any grant of reserve matters consent. And just in terms of the red line, you can see before you the sort of long, thin section sticking out to the right-hand side is a length of internal spine road, which connects through to a length of internal spine road already consented previously, and ultimately that then provides an internal completion of the internal road network within the development. That section of spine road does also include a bridge over the brook, which is the black line running down on the right-hand side. Hopefully you can see with the cursor on that as well. Again, the relief road runs to the south of the site, which is where the blue line area is, so just actually on the inside of that blue line area. And again, just to give some context, the application is the area outlined in red, so that you can see that it sort of sits in the southern sort of corner, as it were, of the overall SUE. You have Woodburkett hamlet or village, well, yeah, more of a hamlet, which is to the north, the brook to the east, and then you can see the position of the relief road. So in terms of the site, just to quickly run through some again, this is a view from the western end of the site. You can see the initial section of road coming into it that's already been constructed. The trees that you can see there in the middle ground would all be retained. Standing in the same position, looking more sort of north, think, yes, north. You can see Wood Burkett. The building in the foreground is recently constructed, new property. Beyond that, you have the white building you can see is actually a Grade 2 listed building, and the rear boundary of that property is the hedge line that you can see running through there. The path coming up to you in the foreground is I think that's a shared cycleway from memory. I can't recall exactly, but certainly it's the going to be the official diversion route of one of the public rights of way. Again, just moving around, giving a clearer view as to the rear of the property that's adjacent, and obviously the fence that encloses that new dwelling. The dwellings you can see beyond is the David Wilson parcel, which is currently under construction. And then the road coming into that area runs just in the foreground of those. And then the turning head, the Hammerhead turning area at the end of Wood Burkett, you can make out there. So that's obviously separates Wood Burkett into a separate cul-de-sac from the development. Just sort of moving around, again, this is another image towards the rear of the listed building, quite extensive vegetation along that boundary. Panning round more to the east, again, another large mature tree, which is to be retained as part of the development. The application site is the land in the foreground. Beyond the tree, outside the application site, is the location of the proposed cricket pitch, and there would also be adjacent to that a pavilion and parking area. But that is subject to a separate application. This is a view looking across the middle of the site. Again, you can see it's relatively flat. The tree and much of the hedgerow that you can see in the middle ground would be retained. The rather gappy hedge in the foreground, again, largely retained, gapped up as necessary. And I think roughly this position that you can see in the centre here is where there would be the play area within the centre of this parcel. Another view from that position, just panning round slightly. So the application site extends as far as the hedgerow that you can see sort of in the middle ground, if I call it that, sort of slightly, it wasn't the best day for taking photographs, but the hedgerow that you can hopefully just make out running where the cursor is the eastern boundary of the site. That continues to a corner about here and then returns towards the camera to this point at the end of this hedgerow. Beyond, you can see some of the construction areas, the construction compounds, etc., which form more of the eastern end of the site that's currently under construction on the opposite side of the brook. And the relief road runs from approximately position in the middle distance of the photo, coming across the right-hand side and then arcing round and ultimately behind from where the photograph is taken. Just another view again, just showing the openness and relatively flat profile of the application site. One of the hedgerows that crosses the site. Again, all of the hedgerows are in the main retained. There will be a couple of gaps created for internal road connections, but the majority of the hedges are retained or and incorporated into the open space and gapped up as necessary. And then this is the more eastern or southeastern corner of the site. You've got the relief road coming through. This section actually is open to public traffic at the moment. And the application site occupies the area sort of approximately, I think, as far as the ridge line that you can just about make out before it then dips into the valley of the brook beyond. So that last photograph was taken towards the bottom of this. If you can see the cursor looking across this lower corner of the site and the relief road coming round. You can see from the proposed layout how the hedges and trees are retained and incorporated into the layout. The proposal comprises a mixture of 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroomed houses. There's a central equipped play area within this position here. There's also linear open space, a lot of it running parallel with the retained hedges. The Yeah, so as with the previous application, the open space around the southern side of the site adjacent to the relief road has already been consented, as has much of that up this western side. The cricket pitch, pavilion, car park, and much of this area does not yet have reserved matters consent. That would come forward separately in a later application. The listed building to the north is this building just here. And due to the distances, separation distances, the new dwelling, isn't actually shown on this plan, but it's in this location in here. And just to clarify that there would be no unacceptable impact on amenity from any existing neighbours in terms of loss of light or privacy, etc. In terms of the affordable housing, again, they're the units highlighted. The blue plots would be shared ownership. The orange or orangey yellow plots would be rented, affordable rent. These comprise a mix of 2, 3 and 4 beds. There are also 2 bungalows within those. It's set out in 4 separate clusters. So we've got a cluster here, cluster of 2 fronting onto this road, a separate cluster of 11 onto this road, and then a cluster of 6 onto this shared private drive. The affordable provision is 22, which is slightly below the 10% requirement, which should in theory be sort of 24 or 25. But across the wider SUE to date, the amount of affordable provision is up to date. And if there is any shortfall of the odd 1 or 2 dwellings at any point, they can be quite easily made up on subsequent parcels, as the committee has consented to previously. We've had some parcels with no affordable and then other subsequent or concurrent parcels where that shortfall has been made up. In terms of the street scene, the house types, with the applicant, obviously Persimmon, having done a large number of separate reserve matters so far, the house types are all very familiar. They're all, units that we've approved. There's a significant variety there in terms of a mixture of Georgian, Victorian, and vernacular, mixture of different elevational treatments and materials. In terms of materials, there are 7 stone plots within this layout, so they're all deliberately in the more prominent locations to make sort of better value of the stone. So we have 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here. Well, actually, sorry, 2 here, 1 here. The rest of the materials are a repeat of the materials that have been used, the palette of materials, which delivers a high quality of finish and reinforces local distinctiveness. In terms of the bridge that would go over the brook, this is a relatively utilitarian, functional design. The design of the bridge, again, is consistent with the bridges that we've already consented on the development to date, and meets the Highway Authority's adoption criteria, which is probably the most significant aspect of the influencing the design. Just to show again and highlight the landscaping and retention of hedges throughout the parcel, and particularly the trees within those hedge lines and the gapping up of those. Some of the hedgerows, for example, on the eastern side are actually predominantly outside the site, but the design of the layout has been undertaken to positively respond to all of those features. So with regard to updates, members' attention is drawn to the written updates. The recommendation is that consent be granted subject to the conditions outlined in the report, with delegated authority to officers to amend those conditions as deemed necessary. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Dan. You couldn't pick a more miserable day to take your pictures on, really, could you? Councillor Cecile Irving-Smith, please.
Thank you. Speaking of hedgerow, at the previous application, we didn't see the hedgerow very clearly, but here you show. And if I'm not mistaken, those hedgerow were laid. So do we have a maintenance of hedgerow? Because if a hedgerow has been laid, it has to be laid every 25 years, which is quite, and in the Northamptonshire way. So are the hedgerow is, and you have no, and I can say that because we had a case in the village. A hedgerow cannot be protected when you have houses on both sides of an hedgerow, because it's not a hedgerow anymore. It doesn't have an agricultural name, so it's a decorative hedgerow. So what is the condition you have put on the hedgerow? One, that they are protected. Secondly, that they are relayed. Because if you don't lay those hedgerow, you lose the hedgerow, and you have to maintain them. They are not privacy, they are hedgerows, so you cannot have them at, they need to be around 5 to 6 meters, and when you lay them, they are at 4.5, between 4.5 and 5.5. Sorry for the description, and I'm pretty sure of what I said because of we have hedgerow. So what do we do? Because it's very nice to say the hedgerow, but they need to be protected. And by law, a hedgerow is not protected.
Dan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So yes, in terms of the hedgerows, I think it's fair to say that there's a bit of a mixed bag on this development. Some of them are very gappy and very poor quality, and clearly haven't been maintained properly for a significant amount of time. And obviously the proposal will gap those up and include new planting to fill those out. In terms of, again, the approach to the hedgerows, in all instances, houses front onto them, so they're actively incorporated into the open space rather than being a nuisance at the back of someone's house that's difficult to get at and ultimately causing maintenance problems in the long term. With regard to them laid, I can't recall that they appeared to me to be as though they'd been recently laid or actively managed. I mean, I think most hedgerows now are just flailed on an annual basis. I think it is a sort of a recognised issue for developments such as this, that there is often a requirement to retain them because of the sort of linear wildlife corridor, the ecological value, the historic value, and to mention but a few that they bring. But that long-term management is a bit of an issue because whereas a farmer will routinely flail the hedge and easily with a tractor they can just get around and keep on top of them, once they become part of a developed area, they're not necessarily managed in the same way. And some people may feel that there's the hedges don't need cutting as often, and it's nice to have a bushier hedge that etc. But obviously that stores up problems in the long term. The management of these hedges ultimately will be the responsibility of the town council because all of the public open space on the development will be freehold transferred to the town council, and it will be up to them as to exactly, as a responsible, local authority, how they deal with it. What I have attempted to do is make it, as I said, make the hedgerows accessible so that maintenance is relatively easy, whether you can get a flail to them potentially as well.
Come back, a hedgerow is not a privacy boundary, it's a hedgerow. So you need to have the number of species. So in fact, you should know how old your hedgerow are, because depending, they can be 200 years old, 400 years old. But looking at the way they were laid, it was quite clear they were not laid. Now, a hedgerow, it has been laid. If you don't relay it, it doesn't stop to be a hedgerow. And in fact, the hedgerow goes farther and farther. And you have two hedgerows where the middle is on. So you say that the edge are essential to the development. If you do not put a condition, they will not be essential to the, and they will be lost because people will think they are privacy hedge, and privacy hedge are not hedgerow. And if you leave a hedgerow as a privacy hedge, you lose your hedgerow. And if you don't want to believe me, you just have to write to the king, because he is absolutely passionate about hedgerow. And if a hedgerow is not laid, you lose a hedgerow. And flaying, yes, you do that in the open countryside, but after a while, you will lose your hedgerow. A hedgerow has been laid. So I'm sorry, I don't know how you can, on the condition, make sure that they stay as hedgerow. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the outline consent, I think, does require ecological and biodiversity management. There's a condition to discharge that deals with how these things are to be managed. You know, firstly, what provisions are going to be made in that sense, and then how it's managed. I think the issue is that ultimately, in the long run, it goes to the town council. This isn't an instance where it will be a private owner responsible for it. It will be the town council who will be able to, in the public interest, and you know, for the wider good, they will be able to manage the hedge in an appropriate manner. I don't think that we can really impose any condition necessarily at this stage to set anything out, because
if you do not set a condition, you cannot protect the hedgerow. So you have to set the condition that the hedgerow has to be relayed in appropriate time. So it's a hedgerow has to be relayed roughly every 20 to 30 years, depending of the number of species you have it. And if you do not lay it, and if you just fly it, you will lose your hedgerow. Thank you.
No, I mean, yeah. No. I accept it's very sort of, it's a problem that, or issue that we've struggled with a little on this development, because on the one hand, retaining the hedgerow, just tree protection. That's just during construction. Yeah, so it's one of those things. A hedgerow within the countryside is protected and is managed properly. When it becomes within an urban area, it's a very different thing, because
so a hedgerow is protected if on the opposite side you have an agricultural things. When you have, it's never protected. You need to have one side is open countryside. If you have a hedgerow in a development, it's not. It's not called a hedgerow, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's just a hedge.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pritchard, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. One with regards to drainage and attenuation ponds. I didn't see any. And secondly, just to confirm that this, I appreciate that this particular application and the previous one, could you just confirm that all of the vehicular traffic won't be onto the link road other than by the main roundabouts that are on the link road?
Good questions.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just for a second. So in terms of the second point, the vehicular traffic, the only access points onto the Relief Road are the roundabouts. So there's one here and one here.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, sorry about that.
I think there's 2 or 3 roundabouts, but
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure that all the traffic.
Okay,
went
so
onto the
yeah,
roundabout.
sorry, just to start that point again. We've got the roundabout to the west of the site here, and then one to the east. There is no other access onto the Relief Road, and the spine road that I mentioned. So we have the central spine road coming off back into the site there, and then the arm that comes through, links through as we've got to this point here, and then that continues up to the primary school. So all of the houses within this parcel will be fed onto that internal spine road that then links out to other connections. And then the other question you had was the suds.
Attenuation pond.
Yes, so again, on that point, yes, there are no suds basins within this specific parcel. There are suds already within the wider SUE. There's a large suds basin in this location. From this position where we are, sorry, that yellow box keeps coming up. This area naturally flows down to the east towards the brook. So the large suds basin here, essentially, as I understand it, will capture everything within this wider area. You know, the application site and everything to the south of Wood Burkett. That would be determined at discharge condition on the outline. So it's not something that we need to have full detail of at this stage, but that's the general approach and why there's not one in this red line.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sharps, I think, was first.
Thank you. In regards to Hedge Lane, they've across Bucks, Northamptonshire, and lots of other counties. But in May 2024, DEFRA put out a thing regarding a two-metre buffer. And I believe it's covered under our boundary treatment plan. So we can put in condition under that. That's helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, yes, just to confirm, there is at least 2 metres of buffer deliberately left around all of these. As you know, the plan has been to give the hedges a reasonable amount of breathing space, as it were, not only from the point of view of them growing, but also access to maintain them and incorporate them into open space, and not be pressured by you know, rear garden extensions and that sort of stuff that you may see on other developments elsewhere, sort of more historically, where hedgerows were sort of seen as a thing to back onto. They're, you know, deliberately incorporated here. Thank you.
Councillor Purser, please.
Yes, I'm just disappointed that the number of affordable housing units in this proposal comes in below our 10% rather than just above. It would have been a nice gesture if that could have been seen, but we seem whatever the minimum standard is, we go below it rather than above it. And I'm just disappointed that that's so, and I don't know whether there is any scope to renegotiate that or put a condition that we actually do meet the 10%. It seems 10% is well below what our policy is, and this is a greenfield site. Really, there should be no, it seems to me there are no kind of reasons why we couldn't be. Well, I mean, I'm just disappointed we're closer to 10% than our policy, but to go below it by a couple of houses, kind of. I hope they're not taking the mick, but it feels a bit like it. You know, they could just meet the 10%.
But to be fair, over the whole 2,740 or whatever number we're talking about nowadays, there will be a 10% provision. Absolutely guaranteed. That's what's there. So some are above. I mean, we've put things through here where there's no affordable housing whatsoever. A whole plot or a phase was over probably a year, 18 months
We had
ago.
a previous phase for about 40 or 50 houses that had no affordable within that particular parcel, but it is immaterial because the provision is ultimately whether across the entire screen, the entire planned development area on that plan that we get 10%. It's not about whether each individual parcel.
Just as a matter of interest, do we keep a running total?
We do. There is a plan somewhere. I don't know that I actually have it with me, but
well, I know somebody who has.
Yeah.
So that is Lucy, who's the Persimmon lady from this estate, and I gave her ability to speak out of order. That's fine. Thank you, Lucy.
We do have a plan, Chair, which I can share with members.
Well, I just think because we keep having this discussion, if we each time we brought a phase one, we said, well, this is the target, this is where we got to, it would just ease the members' view of what's going, just as a little thing each time. You've got the numbers, so if you just presented them each time, we knew where we got to at that stage, would be helpful. So I missed who was it? Was it Councillor Humphreys or I don't mind. Decide, ladies. All right, fair enough. Councillor Sharps then.
I did notice we have chimneys. I take it these are fake chimneys again. I love a fake chimney, you know, as the next person does, you know, Santa can pop down it at Christmas, you know. But they have proven to be quite difficult for residents in other areas. Was this discussed at all by anyone at any point, or are we just leaving them there to then be removed at a later date?
I was going to, back in the days of SNC, well, where I was with some other members around here, yes, faux chimneys was the rule of the day. The design code for the whole of this zoo incorporates faux chimneys, so that's where we're at. So we're working to the design code, so they're encompassed with it. Do you want to add any more, Dan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, it was something that was actively negotiated by South Northants at the time of doing the design code was that there would be, well, not only the design code at the outline consent, that there would be, and the section 106 includes provision for design uplift as part of that. So part of the viability that was done at the time included, higher quality materials, higher quality architectural detailing, and things like chimneys. And that was something that was balanced out as part of that reduction of affordable housing. Was at the time it was deemed necessary to really push for design, and chimneys is an important aspect of that in terms of creating, more visual interest to the roofscape that is quite often lacking on a lot of modern housing developments. So the provision that's within here is fully in accordance with those fairly stringent stipulations that they would be chimneys.
I am well aware of the current code, but we were just putting through a different one, which actually removed the chimneys because of all the different bugbears that they cause. So I'm disappointed to see so many. How many chimneys are going up?
I do have it in the materials plan.
I think it's £235 they cost approximately for a resident to remove.
So there are, you see here's chimney positions. I don't have the full, what's that, 48? I mean, it's somewhere in the region of 70% at least of the plots have chimneys. More on the more prominent plots, every house will, and then on some of the discrete plots further back, fewer. But it's somewhere in the region of 200 of those plots have chimneys.
See a problem, point it out. I see a problem, I'm pointing it out. If you wish to put chimneys on this plot, there we are. But I don't think in reality that's uplift.
Well, we're working within the requirements of the section 106 and the outline planning consent, which stipulated that they're formally required. So
It's part of the design code, and so it will continue. That's why you've got chimneys on schools in Brackley, I believe. Councillor Pritchard, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to actually propose that we actually accept the recommendation by the planning officer on these conditions.
Councillor Mars, you seconding, or are you going to speak? Absolutely.
Dan, just a question. In the conditions, in the previous application, and technically, is the previous application the same type of application that we're dealing with now?
The previous item,
Yes,
item
previous
5,
item.
yes, they're both reserved matters.
So
applications.
in the previous one, you had a section 7, I think, on solar, and you've got no solar. And I assume there's no solar or EV charging in both these proposals.
So in relation to the solar, that's more something because the original outline permission does not require solar because it was 2015. It's not a planning requirement. Any phase delivers it, although modern building regs means that increasingly more and more of these parcels were being caught by that. The previous item is caught by modern building regs and so will be needing to put solar panels on, whereas this parcel is not, and therefore it's not currently forming part of the proposal. I think later phases will do. Almost more universally. It depends on the point at which each individual developer registers for building regs as to whether they're caught by, older regs or newer versions of regs.
No, I'm just reading your section. The condition 7 said prior to the occupation of any dwelling, should solar PV panels be required, they should be flush. So shouldn't that same condition be inside this?
No, it shouldn't. Well, I don't think that there is any intention from the developer to install solar panels on this parcel whatsoever.
My understanding is if in June next year, any development that's not above the slab will have to have solar panels.
Building regs. As I said, I think my understanding is that whether something is caught by those new legislation requirements next year is down to the point at which it was registered for building regulations, like the application was.
Okay.
And
I mean, it defies imagination why they're not putting in solar and PV chargers. I mean,
they are actually putting in EV charging though now. So this phase, I can't recall whether item 5 was proposing EV charging or not, but certainly the item you're determining now, EV charging is now as standard being provided on all new Persimmon
Right.
development plots on this site.
But no heat pumps and no solar.
No, I mean, I think it depends, like I said, it's the point at which they're caught by, I think it's 2026. So it's not like it's this coming year, it's the year after.
Oh, is it?
That things would, so we're in a transition, I think, ultimately, and some things will be caught and some things won't be.
My question really was why isn't that section 7 isn't incorporated in the conditions here in the event that it does happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's because there's no expectation or anticipation that is going to be occurring on this particular parcel.
But they're not going to get that down. They're not going to get 246 built in the next 18
No, but
months.
I think it's not the point at which it's built. I think my understanding is the point at which you put your application into register for building regs. So you say to the building control department or whoever, we're about to start building these. This is the start of our application. It's not the point at which they're actually built and occupied for each individual plot. But I might be wrong on that. But I think Persimmon are quite clear as an applicant that that's not going to be something that catches this
I'll ask
parcel.
first.
Well, I'd rather not ask Persimmon, to be honest. I'd rather ask our own
Well,
experts.
Can we ask Catherine on my right, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not completely familiar with the new legislation and the regular changes that are going on at the moment and the transitional arrangements we're currently in. But my understanding is that it's not as when they're built. I think it's either reserve matters applications that come forward and/or when those consents are then implemented. So the shovel in the ground moment is the key issue as to whether or not then they are then caught going forward for the new building regulations requirements for solar panel requirements and other renewable energy requirements that would then follow. I think we need to make sure that that's what we're clear on that for the applications going forward that come before members, but that's my understanding is it's shovel ready rather than.
Yeah, but you're not answering why is it a condition in the previous application and not this application?
Because it's believed that one will be caught and it's believed that this one won't be caught, but that's matter for Dan to perhaps
and if-
clarify a
sorry,
little bit
Well,
further.
for everybody's benefit, Dan, and I don't understand it, can you tell me why 5 and 6 are different in terms of what got caught and what didn't get caught, please?
Right. I mean, I would
In basic
I would
terms,
first like to make
I
it
don't
clear that
understand.
I'm not a building regs expert at
No,
all.
no, I'm not suggesting you are.
But my understanding is that because Barratt Homes are a new developer on this site and haven't previously sort of registered themselves on this site, that's why they're caught. In the same way that the David Wilson parcel, which is going up, you saw in the photos, is going up, those do have solar panels because they were a new developer on the site. And equally, where Parkview Stables was, if you recall, the building that was demolished, the developer doing that as a new developer was caught, has solar panels. I think it's different in this instance because Persimmon have been on this site for a significant amount of time. They've potentially registered, a significant part of the site ahead of the new regulations coming in as to why they deem that that's not going to be caught for this particular parcel. So that's why there's a distinction.
That makes sense to me. Councillor Clark had his hand up earlier. Sorry, Councillor Sharp.
Thank you. I second Councillor Pritchard's proposal to approve the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp, before we go to the vote,
Yeah,
please.
Can I just ask that officers use a different language set? Because court is, I know what you're saying,
subject
but,
to.
it's something that's coming online and court sort of infers something different. So I prefer we don't use that language.
No,
Thank
no,
you.
I accept. I didn't want to infer anything negative
In
by
sub-
complying with
Is
more
subject
modern.
to, something like that? Is subject to? Just a suggestion. Yes, Councillor Humphries, please.
Could I just ask going forward that we have some clarity on when developers will be subject to the new regulations or not? Because we feel we're all a bit in the dark at the moment.
We'll get clarification for future meetings.
Thank you.
And I think you make a fair point that it's not just solar, it's any other building regulations that we certainly need to be aware of that would be good if we could be appraised before we consider them. Councillor,
And also the number of affordable houses.
yes, we're already, yes,
So
we're already.
you will have a lot of work next time.
Right, are we finished with this? So we happy to go to a vote? Any more discussion? So those in favour of accepting the officer's recommendation, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. So under urgent business, a couple of things. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for the hard work you've put in during the last year. We've had some difficult decisions, some easy decisions like today, but I think we've discharged them in a very professional way, and I thank you for all the effort you've put in. And clearly, I wish you all a very happy Christmas, and thank you for your attendance. Thank you.